சோப்பு இல்லடி, அதுக்கு பேர் சூப்பு.
This call is now being recorded.
Ma'am, Geeta ma'am, konja thalaiya wire kutunga ma'am.
Okay.
Come on.
I'm standing, so I think it's enough. Okay.
No ma'am, just you tilt the phone ma'am.
Okay.
Correct. Yes ma'am, yes.
Ma'am, start பண்ணலாம் ma'am.
Okay. You bring ma'am into the picture. Deepa?
Yes ma'am, yes ma'am.
ஒரு நிமிஷம் மேம், அவங்க எழுந்து போயிட்டாங்க. ஒரு நிமிஷம் ரிட்டர்ன் கம்பேன்.
சரி. Okay.
Wilson, shall we start?
Yes, let's start.
Ma'am, yes ma'am. Geeta ma'am.
Okay.
Yes.
Good evening, ma'am. I'm Dr. Geeta, professor in
Good evening.
Good evening. Professor in the Department of Special Education and the Dean School of Education at our institute. Sisters on the faculty and participants for the international webinar on assessment, feedback and technology. A very warm welcome to one and all present. It gives me immense pleasure to welcome our Vice Chancellor Madam, Dr. Premavati Vijayan, who was the former Professor, Department of Special Education and the former Dean, School of Education, now the Vice Chancellor of our university, who has been motivating us for all our activities and programs that we have been conducting in the department, in the School of Education for the benefit of the faculty and the students. I also take pleasure in welcoming our registrar, Dr. S. Kausalya ma'am, for guiding us in all our activities. Immense gratitude is extended to and welcome extended to Dr. G.P. Jayanti ma'am, Director, Research and Consultancy, for all the support she has been extending in organizing these webinars for the students and the community at large. Warm welcome to the sisters on the faculty and to all the participants who have gathered here for this international webinar. I think I'll just take a few minutes to introduce our speaker for this session. Ma'am, Dr. Wilson is not new to our School of Education because she has been in our institute at Avinash Lingam University as a Fulbright Nehru Scholar in the year 2012 to 13. And she had visited Campus 1 also. That's how I had a little familiarity with Dr. Wilson, and I'm confident to speak about her in a few words. She has, Dr. Wilson completed M.Ed from Cambridge College and Doctorate in Education from the University of Maine, and has abiding interest in studying and teaching children's non-fiction literature and how it can support literacy programs, nurture critical thinking and writing, and connect families and schools. While she started out as a history and social studies teacher, she realized that without literacy, students could not function in the world. With scientists in her family, her interest in non-fiction in science remained a line of inquiry. Dr. Wilson served on the Orbis Pictures Award Committee of the National Council of Teachers of English from 2002 to 2008, and also served as a member and then chair. Since 1989, the Orbis Pictures Committee has honored her outstanding non-fiction literature written for children. Dr. Wilson served as treasurer of the New England Reading Association from 2006 to 2012 and serves on its editorial board for the NERA journal, that is New England Reading Association journal, as well as she's on its board. She writes for and edits the book and reviews columns for the journal. She has served as co-editor of the Dragon Lord, a peer-reviewed journal on children's literature and reading since 2008. An interest in tapestry design and weaving has motivated Dr. Wilson to explore as to how tapestry weaving shares parallel features with writing. Maybe in the midst of her presentation, she may be able to highlight a little of this particular aspect to enable our children to know the link between tapestry weaving and writing for children, I think. Through interactive teaching and integrating both theory and practice, Dr. Wilson strives to give students the knowledge and experience in teaching so that they can bring multiple approaches and strategies to their work with the children. We thank you, Madam, for accepting our invitation and welcome you to we look forward to your deliberations on the topic Teaching, Technology, Design and Assessment. Welcome, Madam Dr. Wilson.
Thank you, Madam.
It gives me immense pleasure to welcome all our student participants and all the other faculty members from various universities and various states within the country and outside. Welcome, one and all. Thank you.
Today, I wanted to share with you some points on mainly design, assessment, and teaching. We are doing technology. And so this particular presentation, the outcomes of this presentation are, first of all, to identify characteristics of backward design in any course, any program. And I'm going to be describing a process of using backward design and explain aspects of backward design that guides learning design and assessment. We're looking at Bloom's taxonomy. For many of you, this will be very familiar. And for some of you, it's going to be possibly new. But the Bloom's taxonomy gives us a sense of cognitive function levels that people use in thinking and learning. Please be sure to use the chat function. I don't have it turned on, but I want to make sure that you use the chat function so that you can ask questions as we go. And so what is backward design? Backward design is where you start with the end. You start with what do you want students to be able to do and know by the end of the course. And the question is, for backward design and designing outcomes, is how are they going to show you what they are able to do and what they know? So it's starting with the outcomes, and you always come back to the outcomes, and the assessments and instructional design come from the assessments. The backward design also defines how students will show whatever content, concepts, cognitive processes, work that you want them to do intended in the course. Basically, there's a controversy about whether we do outcomes, that is to say, course objectives or learning outcomes. Some of you have program outcomes that you're using for your course outcomes. Some of us have just course outcomes. In my particular program, we have program outcomes that all the courses are aligned to, and I'll come back to that at the very end. And whether you start with learning design and instructional practices and then go to assessment, or whether you do assessment from the outcomes, what do you want students to be able to do to show they meet the outcomes, is a matter of controversy. How can you devise an assessment if you don't know what you teach? But how do you know what to teach unless you know what the assessment's going to be? What they will have to do, whether it's a project, demonstration, a paper, a test, a display, then you know how you teach toward that. But some people, it's a controversy. There's not a right way. The point is that they all work together, and we keep them all in mind. This whole process has really refreshed my thinking about it and has caused me to really relook at courses. People all over this country, as well as you in India and in Tamil Nadu, have been working with assessment and outcomes for years. And we're really in it to make our learning accountable and make it really work well for students and make it transparent. So this is all about that. So my approach here in this presentation is outcomes to assessment and then the learning design. And so the slides are going to proceed in that way. So why do we do this? We want students to know what they need to know at the end of our course. We also need to know where we have to get to. It helps students understand the extent to which they've gotten to the end result. And it helps us understand how we've taught and how we have to reteach certain things to get to the end result of whatever we want students to be able to do and to know. It helps, the outcomes help us design learning instruction, instructional practices in relation to rigor and complexity. And I'm going to come back to this as it relates to outcomes and assessment and learning design. 3 points I want to bring out before we get into looking at how do we design outcomes to really make them meaningful, measurable, and manageable. Those are the 3 M's in my institution that we keep in mind. Any single outcome, is it meaningful? Is it getting at what you need to be getting at in the course, in the program? And can you measure it? Can you observe it? Showing respect is a wonderful goal, but what do you do? How can it be measurable? Specifically, some behavior, some verb, some action to take to show levels of respect for another. Perhaps demonstration of responding to what others say by repeating it or by paraphrasing it. Whatever that demonstration is, it needs to be measurable, something that we can observe. And finally, manageable. If you're teaching if we're teaching a literature course or teaching a writing course, having a 300-page novel published by the end of the course is probably not manageable. But writing sections of a chapter or writing short pieces might be more manageable. So these are three things to consider in any outcome. Note also that one particular course outcome, and I'm going to be showing you that later on, one course outcome can be used for multiple courses and across multiple years in a program. So the first thing I want to show you is Bloom's taxonomy. Now there are many examples of Bloom's taxonomy on Google, and this one actually came from Dr. Vigil, who you met at the beginning in a course that we're taking now, a university professional development. Am I presenting? It says I'm not presenting. Everyone can hear all right?
Yes, Wilson.
Okay, thank you. And I got a message, and it's sort of what I just wanted to check with you. We're all taking a course in this very topic of learning design, outcomes, and assessment to create syllabi and instruction that is fairly consistent for our students, since many of our students are going to be online. And so we are going to be using the verb form to remember, understand, apply, and analyze, evaluate, and create. Understand that these are levels of cognitive function. They are not the outcome itself. There are particular verbs to use that get at these particular functions. For instance, and I'll show you another Bloom's taxonomy, but keep these in mind because your outcomes in your courses, you're going to be looking at the outcomes in your syllabi to see what function you're asking students to use. In beginning courses, you might have them do a lot of remembering and understanding. But in second and third year classes, you're going to be having them do that and make applications. Student teaching is a lot about applications. Lab work is a lot about applications of knowledge and process. You're going to be wanting them to do analysis, but they still have to be able to explain content and remember content in order to do an analysis. So these are not isolated. One builds on another. And I'm going to show you later a rubric for looking at how you can use these layers, these levels in devising a rubric. This is information on the new revised Bloom's taxonomy, which we are using and which I think is really helpful, that knowledge becomes a verb and it becomes remembered in synthesis, because create is something that you're creating new knowledge. You're adding to scholarly information. It's something doctoral students do. They're creating new knowledge. It's not creating a template or creating an artifact. That is more at the application level, because you're actually using your knowledge to apply in a new context. Create is really new knowledge, new information. Fourth year would be doing this. Nursing programs will be doing this. When you're discovering something in the lab related to bacteriology. And we'll go on to the next one. So here are verbs that get at these levels. So remembering is define, duplicate, list, memorize, repeat, state, recall, the details of learning. Understanding would be more like describing, explaining, locating, recognizing. Applying would be doing that in a new context. And it would be interpreting, which almost is getting to analysis. You're applying content that you understand and remember in a new context. So I'm going to be using some of these verbs when I create outcomes. So keep these in mind. You can find these. There are many of these on Amazon. Sometimes they're circles, sometimes they're lists. Really helpful to keep these in mind. Now, rigor. I want to make a couple of comments about rigor and complexity. Cognitive rigor has to do with the Bloom's verbs. So if you're asking people to identify the bones of the lower leg, that is low Bloom's. That's not rigorous. If you have them repeating that, that's still low Bloom's. They're doing it more, but they're not doing it. There's not added rigor. If they have to explain the function of the bones, or if they have to explain what happens if to the other parts of the lower leg, if one bone is damaged, then that is higher up the Bloom's taxonomy. Complexity is a little different from that. Complexity would have to relate to the numbers of things that students have to know to be able to complete the task. So I have an example down here. We might have students remember all the presidents and remember their political parties and the political parties of their prime ministers too. Okay, so that's a memory. That's a memory kind of task. It's a lot, but it's still memory. But it's more rigorous to explain the contributions that presidents made or prime ministers made in their terms, and more complex. It's more rigorous because you're up the Bloom's taxonomy and to explain and even analyze, and more complex because you have to be thinking about more things. What do they do? What are the categories that we would use for talking about contributions? Social, we would talk about economic advances, we would talk about health advances, we would talk about certainly social programs, education, peace in the world, global connection, all the kinds of categories that our students would look at to explain contributions of a particular a prime minister. You could even go up further up the Bloom's taxonomy if you had them compare the prime ministers, the contributions of the prime ministers. And then you would have to go up even more to evaluate, to say who was, having compared them, all the contributions, who will you argue is the best, which is an evaluation, a judgment. Be careful of verbs, because a verb can be low Bloom's. Select a color. Okay, select a color. You got brown, red, and white. Select one of those three. That's low Bloom's. But if you're asking, what is the best option for teaching this child who has come to us in our classroom, that's actually a higher Bloom's, complexity and rigor, because you have to be thinking about all the elements of teaching, the child's background, the child's experience, the outcomes of the program, what languages the child speaks, what physical challenges the child might have, what mental challenges or emotional challenges you have to deal with and accommodate. So the verb can actually work in different places depending on the complexity and rigor of the task. I'm going to pass on these ones, but I did want to ask you to think at some point if you could think about the fluidity at the higher levels of Bloom's. Now, when we're at the lower levels of remember and understand, we're actually thinking of convergent thinking. We have in a sense, a right answer. There's one answer. We come to it. When did Prime Minister Nehru, his daughter, Indira Gandhi, when did she die? That's low blooms, and it's convergent thinking. It's an answer that is an answer. But the upper blooms even apply to some extent, but analyze, evaluate, create, really are divergent thinking. There are multiple answers. And we want to think about the courses. To what extent do we need our students to be in higher blooms and lower blooms when they graduate and when they complete a course? Do we want them to be, we might want them in an introductory course to be really strong in the lower three: application, understand, and remember. But if we want our teachers and nurses and clinicians, chemists, to be critical thinkers and knowledgeable about dealing with the world, we might want them to be moving up into analysis, evaluate, and create. There are other kinds of taxonomies to look at. You understand that Bloom's taxonomy does not deal with emotional thinking, which Maslow helps us out with. So that would be a different consideration from the one I'm using here, but it's certainly one to be using, and those will be different rubrics also. So this is an activity. I'm going to pass along this activity sheet to Deepa, and she can share it with you. It's a way for you to be thinking about your course outcomes, if you have 7 or 8, whatever they are, or your program outcomes, whatever they are, you can map them on Bloom's taxonomy. And this is an example from mine. Here's what the Bloom's taxonomy means, the Bloom's level. Here are verbs for it. And here's some examples of activities, of course activities that are basically assessments. I'm calling all the activities that I grade, that I score, are assessments. Whether it's a book talk like this, that's a public presentation, whether it's a critique, a written, an essay, whether it's a test or a quiz, whether it's a response activity, any particular activity that is in the course that is scored is actually is a kind of assessment. So these are activities that I included from the course. I'm using children's literature as my course here. And here is the course outcome. You'll see that my course outcome is aligned with a program outcome. And this program outcome is a national standards for teaching, developed by one guy, but presumably developed by the consortium of state school superintendent officers. And it is the Interstate Teacher Assessment, I can't remember what it means. Oh dear. But the standards that all teachers are accountable for, that many programs use in their designing their programs, so that we have a level of accountability that is professional throughout the country. Now, here is my learning outcomes sheet that I'm sharing with you that has everything for the children's literature course. Now, you'll notice I've changed mine after talking to Dr. Vignew and Travis Allen, our director of assessment in the university. If CREATE is developing new scholarly knowledge, which would be at the level of a master's or thesis or a doctoral dissertation, then I realized that, I don't really have my students in this course doing that. We don't do everything in every course, and that's fine. We want to track what we do in a particular courses and across all our courses. I do have students evaluate. They have to make judgments about what's a good book and what isn't a good book. They have to make judgments of what's a book to use with a particular child. Analyze. I do have them do analyses of novels and nonfiction and picture books. Application. I have them do quite a bit of application. And then I actually have them do very little recall per se. I do not assess for recall. So so in this particular course, I realized, oh my gosh, oh dear. I expect the students to be able to gather these things and use them pretty much at a higher level. This is a third-year course. It's a 300 course. And so we do a lot of applying, but they have to understand and they have to remember. They have to be able to do that. So I have to know that if I want them to apply, I have to make sure that that they can explain and they can recall information. And I do that. And I'll show you an instructional sequence that shows that. So let's come back here to this. And I think that I've actually just showed you that. The other thing about it is that if you do a lot of recall and understanding your courses, we still need to give our students time to practice. So I'm actually doing something in this presentation that we should not be doing in our classes. I'm talking at you. Now I've been talking at you for about 15 minutes. And well, at this point in the classroom, we would stop and you would have students discuss and then recall or explain points that they have learned, maybe what they think is most interesting, what they think is new, what they would like to try, what they want to know more about, some kind of stopping so that they have a chance to regroup and process what they've heard. As human beings, we can't listen actively for more than 10, 12 minutes. We hear, but we may not be thinking and processing what we're hearing. And students even more so. And active learning gives us a chance to talk, to write about what we're hearing. What is this thing? Template. So I'm going to be passing along this template to you so that you can do this together. You can do this on your own to look at, just take your outcomes and look at how they map onto Bloom's taxonomy and revise the outcomes so they reflect the 3 M's. Meaningful for the course and your program, measurable and manageable. So now I'm going to move into assessments from my outcomes. What do I want students to be able to do? Am I going to be assessing? What do they need to do to show their learning toward the outcomes? So there's 2 forms of assessment, and you can be doing a lot of formative assessment. It's low stakes. You could be doing it anecdotal notes during class discussions. You could be writing down notes that the students are making that in their discussions. You could be doing quick quizzes after 15 minutes or 20 minutes. You do a quick quiz to see what they've gotten. So it informs you of what they were learning at the time in that moment, and where you might have to re-instruct or redo or coach or elaborate upon. It can be ungraded, or you can use a 1-point rubric, that is to say, done or not done. So if you have something like you have the students do a little writing, a quick write in your class at the end or midway through the class, then you might just collect those and grade them as done. And they have a score for complete. Complete, 5. Not done, 0. And so you're not making comments. It's just done, and you can use the information for further instruction. Summative assessment is higher stakes. It's scored. It really is looking at how students have achieved the outcomes, the end result. For summative assessments, they need multiple opportunities to show their learning, and multiple ways. So in a history course, only having students do tests, multiple choice tests, is probably not going to be adequate summative assessment to assess, to give them a chance to show their achievement. If they have to write essays, if they have to make presentations, if they have to create a project, if they have to do a simulation of some sort in their history class, then if they have to create new history, if they have to create a narrative from a variety of primary sources, then all those pieces, along with tests and quizzes, can serve as summative assessments, so that any student has a range of ways of presenting content along the Bloom's taxonomy, from explain and recall to more application and analysis and evaluation. The next thing that I would have you do after you do your student outcomes, student learning outcomes, or SLOs, course outcomes, align them with the Bloom's taxonomy, is to take a look at all of your assignments or your assessments. Take a look and then list your outcomes down one side, and all your assignments across the top, and think about what outcomes are students addressing in this assignment. If I'm having them do a presentation from the reading, they really are just presenting information. So I've got that, course outcome 1. If they're doing a critique of a case study, then they still have to be using knowledge. If they're doing a comparison of 2 theories of learning, they still have to have that knowledge. And if I'm testing them, I might be doing a essay on explain the contributions of Vygotsky or Piaget or Jerome Bruner. And then the total would be all of these scores. You don't have to have numbers here at the beginning. Just that what outcomes each test, each assessment, each assignment is touching on. Then you have the totals down here. And you see also which outcomes are addressed the most. I'm just saying that this is a hypothetical. I'm not teaching per se theories of learning at this point. I was teaching theories of learning as a graduate course, but I'm not at this point. It's just a hypothetical. And you'll see that a lot of my assessments require, I'm really addressing that first outcome a lot through all my assignments. The others, I'm only doing actually half. And I'm going to show you my map of another example, of a real example. I hope you can see this. This is the course outcome. And it is aligned. This is the program outcome, which is the national standard. This is content, this is planning, this is strategy. And this is the course outcome, or the SLOs, what students have to do. And I've added numbers so that I know that this particular task, the final essay, which they work on all semester, really is they have to be doing a lot of evaluation and modification. They have to show a lot of knowledge. And so I've actually used numbers here to get the total. And here I've got the total for the final essay. So this is the score that's going to go in my gradebook as a total. And I'm going to create, this is where it gets very interesting, I'm going to create a rubric that deals with all these four course outcomes. So you see that you can start with just the X's, and you can then go back and weigh them so that you really know what you're going to be doing in your assessment. And now you can go back and really be thinking more about what you need to do in the teaching, the learning design part. Let me go back here to the thing, and we're moving on here. So here's the rubrics. I mentioned single point rubric, and so that is something like this. You could have 4 columns, list the skill, define it. It's a check it off, and you might make a comment. It's lots of advantages. Students read them. They're less time to create, less time to score. But one disadvantage is that you can't explain, you can't score for the level of excellence, and you can't score for what further instruction a student might need or might do, what further improvements. That is, where has the student erred? Where has the student been just wrong on something? I was doing a formative assessment on me the other day with a student of mine, and I was patently wrong on something. She didn't say anything, but I discovered it as we went along in the book. And I said, oh my goodness, I see where I went wrong. So that was really an advantage because I could correct myself in that. And it was, I now know what is right. And it's partly because I did the task and I was wrong at it, and we moved on. And then I found out what was right. It was a convergent kind of thing. It was purely a matter of how many people died. And I found out how many people died in the text. I wanted to show you another kind, and this is the kind that is more helpful. It's harder to develop. It's harder to use, but it's called a progressive rubric. Now, a progressive rubric is a developmental rubric in that you're looking at the Bloom's taxonomy again. So, and this I've also added. This is a dispositions rubric from our nursing program, and I wanted to tell you that this particular rubric is used across courses. It's used across all 4 years or 5 years of their program. At the first year level, this would be proficient. This would meet the standard. Proficient is meeting the standard. Exemplary is beyond the standard. It's more of a worldview, big ideas, social awareness, planning action plan. It's outside the context of the course, the program, the task. And as they go through, then the next year, this would become proficient. So the first year, this would be meets, or this would be meets, and this would be exemplary. But the next year, this moves down, and demonstrate it moves up 1. So you use this whole thing across 4 years. Now I wanted to show you, so again, keep in mind that I've used, for this particular disposition, we've used Bloom's taxonomy. Recall and remember, it lists, explains its understanding, demonstrates would be application, basically, but exemplary at year 4 would be where you really create a philosophical statement for a code of ethics in a professional clinical setting, and it also might be how you might create a program, or how you might create a program to teach other teachers. So it takes more of a worldview, a social action kind of thing. I'm going to show you this is what it would look like as just a generic rubric where you have 4. Now notice I've used 4. So emerging not observed would be a 0 or a blank. Emerging would be a 1. Developing is 2. The proficient is a B. That means you got it. That's a 4. And exemplary is 5. Our students want to do a lot of exemplary, and they're very unhappy when they get a lot of proficient. But proficient is really, that's it. especially at the beginning of a course where you're having to do a particular task. A proficient might be really exemplary at that level. So this would be a 4. So this basically here meets the standard for the outcome, whatever that is. And here it does not meet. So it's kind of, the 4 makes it kind of dichotomous. And if you have a 2 and then a 4, you've got a space there. So what do you need to do to be able to get to the 4? Is a bigger bridge than from a 3 to a 4. That's so narrow, that's like splitting a hair. And it's very difficult to determine what the student has to do to get to a 4. But if it's developing, if they're at a 2, then you can really specify what they need to do to get to proficient the next time that they are assessed. You use this rubric for a number of tasks. I use a particular rubric for analysis of books, and I use the same rubric across the whole semester when they submit they have to do a number of them for the whole course, but I grade 3 at the beginning and 3 at the end of different kinds. One is really an analysis, one's a comparison, and one is really more of a practical connection to personal experience. And here's one from my outcomes map, course map. If you recall, I did the Bloom's taxonomy for my outcomes, and here I've got another one, analysis here, and I think that this is also analysis, because they have to make a case why an author exemplifies characteristics of the genre. So that's kind of an analysis. It's almost moving into evaluate. Is this a good book? And so these are sort of upper Blooms, and I would use this for this one for where they have to do an analysis, a critique of a book. If they're just doing a comparison of how to teach books, that's not this one. That's not this particular outcome. If they are just doing a personal response, they make something, I don't use this one. But if they're doing a critique of a book, then I use this one. And you'll notice that I have tried, I'm not saying this is the best one. I'm trying to do the developmental progressive rubric by starting so all cognitive levels are integrated. So a student might be able to identify the age for which a book is appropriate. The book is good for a child who's 6 to 8 years old. That's it. Okay. So that's a 1. At least he's got the age. But at this level, the student would be explaining what is in the book that makes it appropriate for a particular grade level. The language, the structure, the size of the font, whatever the criteria are, the student's explaining, in a sense, making it something of a case for that particular age group. So now here, you're changing the context, I'm changing the context, and the student is making a comparison or contrast among books. You have a collection of stories on friendship, say in fiction. You've got a picture book, you have a few novels, and you have these different novels, and they're different for different ages. And so I would have the student be talking about how the books take the same topic but deal with it in a different way, appropriate for different ages. And I tried to, again, you see here, the verb is more, looks like it's lower Bloom's, but actually I'm asking students to show a sequence of instruction for teaching colleagues in a workshop how they would argue the quality of a book. So this is actually a pretty high level Bloom's, because they will have to know how to work with colleagues, how to teach. They will have to know books. They'll have to have the knowledge of the genre. So there's quite a few things that they have to be able to do to be able to be here. So I was trying to think of something that is more global, social action, as something that would put it into the exemplary range. Not just more of something, but something that makes it more complex and more rigorous. So I've done my Bloom's I've done my course outcomes and activities against the Bloom's taxonomy. I've created my course map with the little X's for how each assignment hits all the outcomes. I've developed a rubric for one of those outcomes. And now I know how I have a sense of an instructional sequence for that, what I want students to be able to do. I want them to be able to analyze books. So what do I need to do to get them there? And again, I go back to Bloom's and I start building knowledge. So the session 1, I'm modeling the reading of the professional literature. They have to get the knowledge. Then I'm setting purposes for their reading. Based on what they have to do in the end, I set purposes for it now. So I tell them, I want you to, in your reading, annotate for what do we look for to identify and explain the type of book it is and its format that's appropriate for youngest readers. 1. 2, I want you to find out, to read for, what are the different levels of reading for the different ages that we can expect in children. So then when they read, they have a purpose for reading, they annotate. Session 2, they come back and they talk about what they found, and I add information in a lecture, a mini lecture. I introduce the performance product. They're going to be doing this analysis. They make an argument for a particular child. They also are making a discussion. I don't have that here, but I will have a discussion of what makes the book, what type is it, what format is it, what are its qualities that make it a good book for that particular child, one book. The next day, I'll review that in a think, pair, share. That is to say, they will write, they will talk, and then they will share as a whole class or as a small group. And they will review. Now they'll talk about the book we did yesterday, but now they'll look at other books also. So they're applying what they learned to new books. And then the session 4 will compare books. And then session 5, so they get the sense of response activities for another kind of assessment. I'll have them work on a response. You might want them to be developing details. So you talk about the details. In other words, online, you focus on what is most important for that particular assignment, that particular assessment, and make comment on that, of what's working and what would make it better. I often read pieces in writing that I write. As a reader, I am wondering about, so that I'm in a response mode rather than in a correction mode. So be a writer and a reader with them, and respond as a writer and respond as a reader, so that something would help you read better. Something would help the audience read better. Those are kind of focus on particular pieces on the comment. Always have the students be thinking about a particular principle, audience, purpose, and make a comment on that. So again, you come back to the outcomes of your course. If the course really focuses on paying attention to purpose of writing, then you might keep making that comment of you've really established the purpose well, or you might say, your purpose might be clarified a little bit. Just focus a little more. What do you want to accomplish in this piece, say? And then some most important piece. One of our instructors used to do three things to improve, but they need to be concise. And I think start big, organization, and then go to something else like details, and then ultimately come down here to grammar, spelling, and usage. It's easiest to do the grammar, spelling, and usage. We sort of rest there, but you want to also be scoring on content for when they're submitting, and whether they've done the task. So what can be done to improve their doing the task? Presentation is important, no doubt about it. And that might come when they resubmit. So have them submit multiple drafts of writing. Maybe submit multiple parts of the project. So problematic students. We've got this, that's a kind of a management thing. You might, that's an excellent question. It brings up another part of the rubric that we actually haven't, I haven't talked about. I did talk about dispositions. You can grade for you can score for dispositions. And you might have dispositions of timeliness, classroom behavior related to small group discussion. Does the student get the work done? Reading done. You decide on the rubric in the outcome what you want students to be able to accomplish. Share the rubric with them, and be using it at some point. And if you have you might be doing a dispositions behavior rubric toward the beginning, maybe in the middle, and at the end. So that you're actually scoring a kind of way, not on content, not on cognition, but on dispositions, behavior. We talk about this. Just don't put it all together with the content one. If you're concerned about timeliness of submissions or participating in classroom discussion, make that a separate rubric. At first, it might be just, does she do it? Does she not do it? But then it might be for problematic students, what are the elements of class discussion that you want the students to demonstrate? Response to others, making a contribution, using the book, citing the text. I said responding to others. Staying on topic. Those might be five elements of behavior. For other management things, there's many kinds of management things, but sometimes we teach for approaching do not touch the student. And because we have a lot of issues around harassment and all in this country, so we really stay away from touch, because students may get bristle, even the college students. Some college students do not like to be touched. They don't even like you to get close. But if there's a management thing to change your proximity from being far away to being closer, is sometimes a way to redirect attention. And one thing I noticed, we were supervising, Deepa and I were supervising in a middle school, and it was a school where the students were just always at each other. And they'd be constantly being pulled apart. And there was one guy in the class, and he clearly was a behavior problem. And I noticed that he was very eloquent in his response to the question the teacher asked, and he knew his material, a good speaker. And so I asked Deepa if we could talk to him outside. Deepa might remember this. So, and of course, he expected to be scolded because he's used to being scolded. He's used to operating in class in the structured situation of teaching, of teacher-student. Teacher asks questions, student answers. Teacher asks questions, student answer. He's used to that. And so when he's pulled outside, he thinks, oh, geez, what did I do wrong now? Well, we pulled him outside, and my comment to him was one of strength, that he had a wonderful voice, very nice voice, nicely paced answer. It was informative, and so forth. I made some, and he would just stood there with his jaw dropped that somebody would actually pull him out to compliment him rather than pull him out to scold him. I think if you have rubrics for behavior, and if you have rubrics for behavior and for dispositions and give students a chance to practice them, if you have a class discussion, structure it really tightly at the beginning and short. 2 minutes. Do this, and you're going to report out. Now, some of the classes are really big. The kids' classes, 125 students. So it's very hard for everyone to report out. But you might say, I will select 3 groups from different areas of the classroom to report out your finding. So you've got 2 minutes to discuss whatever the question is. And then you may be also let them know what they're supposed to be doing in the discussion. They take turns. Each person speaks in turn, so that then they can, they really know what they are needing to do. You've spelled it out behaviorally. And there's other kinds of things to do with problematic students. At times I've had them in the front. I have on occasion, and at times I end up, I have a lot of individual conferences. And again, I had a student who was constantly on her devices. She was on her phone, and when she wasn't on her phone, she was on her iPad. When she wasn't on her iPad, she was on her computer. And she was a lot of time on the phone, and she was doing something else, texting or Facebook or something. And I made the error of sometimes calling on her while she was doing that. Well, that's not the best practice. I shouldn't do that. And she at one point said, "Oh, I wasn't listening." And so I repeated the question. Didn't say anything, just repeated the question. And then she responded. To catch somebody like that in public is not the best practice. I wouldn't advise it. That was sort of something I wish I hadn't done. I wish I had done it some other way. But I did talk to her about the use of devices and mentioned to her the science we understand about what happens to the eyes and the brain when you're always looking at devices, and suggested a method of learning and working that she would look away. And I then told her, "No, you try that." So, ma'am, shouldn't both teachers and students need to get some kind of orientation or to have the rapport to get along well in teaching, learning, and evaluation in virtual classrooms? Yes. Yes. It's an excellent question. And yes. What are the expectations? And also some guidance of how to meet them. So if the expectation is a classroom discussion online, what are the expectations for that? So make it a rubric. In this classroom discussion, these things, this is what you do to do the class discussion. You might even have it down to number of words. I've done that so that you have to write between 75 and 150 words, and you have to address these things. So I have done that, and some of our courses have that piece built in where you actually get down to words. But you don't have to do that quantifying bean counting by any means. But certainly, you're right, orient teachers and students to what you want to see happen in the classroom, and then lay out how to get there with heuristics. What do we need to do the classroom discussion specifically? You might say you have to respond to 2 other people, and you have to do these things in the discussion. You have to use the name, and you have to sign your name. You have to address at least 2 points that they make, and you have to elaborate on those points to build knowledge. Something like that, so that you're really specifying what you want them to do. But yes, certainly orient. Teach how to teach. That's right. And yes, your students will appreciate that they're being treated as learners, and you're a learner among them. I mean, what would we do in a discussion? We would set up how we're going to do it. I do currently chair another award committee, the Notable Books for Global Society Committee. It's a national award. And I tell my committee what I'm going to be doing today. And this is how we're going to be doing it. We're talking about books. And I tell them, we are going to be talking about how the book meets the criteria of the award. If you like it, how does it meet the criteria for in your liking? So you really can specify, just as we do in our discussions. Let's see, anything else? Any other questions?
Yes, Wilson.
I think it's it.
Yes, Wilson. That's it. We have exhausted. You have answered all the questions, Wilson. Hats off to you.
Thank you, Deepa.
Yeah, thank you, Wilson. You have responded to all the questions. We have a student, 11th grade student from New Jersey. He is willing to share some of his experiences that he underwent during this pandemic, and he will tell us how technology has supported his education.
Wonderful.
We'll listen to him. Anish Mani. Yes.
Hi,
Yeah,
my name. I'm from New Jersey, and yeah, we like the transition. Like first, they like announced it, and we had like 2 days break. We started the virtual school. We started using our online calls to like interact with our teachers. It was very different. I'm used to interacting like with my teachers, asking them questions whenever I need, but I could not do that on the Zoom calls because it would be too chaotic if everyone did so. In that sense, it was very different, but it also left me to my own, left to figure out things on my own, which was in a way preparing me for the future, like college. And I also in front of the entire class, like we became the teacher, but we couldn't do that, so I had to do this one privately with my teacher. It was, though I didn't get the experience of doing the presentation in front of my peers, it was still like it was fun to just at least show my work to the teacher. And it was also, we didn't get many assignments really because some of the teachers became lazy and they just like didn't care anymore.
Oh no.
And it was, and they also rescheduled the entire like school system. They made it so it was like we can wake up later. We used to get up at like 5 in the morning, go to the bus at like 6:50, and then get to school by 7 o'clock in the morning. But now it's just started at 9 o'clock and would end at like 2:20, 2:10. Sometimes I would finish all of my work before school started because the teachers would put up the assignments on a website before the next day, and I would wake up early like 6 or 7 and just complete everything. And then I would just relax and do whatever I wanted for the rest of the day. But like some of my teachers are still very committed, and we would do like labs. We didn't have like the chemicals, like I was in chemistry. We didn't do like chemical experiments or anything. We just would do like a demonstration simply to show like how like density or certain other concepts work with like household items, like oil and how oil and water don't mix. Yeah, and we didn't get homework either. And if we did, it was like we would do it in class anyway. And we had no assessments either because there was a fear that we would cheat, which was probably the right thing to do, because even like when any like people though I didn't interact much with my friends, I would end up like hearing through like I had this very big friend group, and through that like group chat I would just see people like corroborating answers to make sure everything was right. And yeah, but a test that also like helped my grades a lot, because I have like I'm very nervous when I take a test. I just don't think in the right way. So I was able to finish with like very high marks at the end, which helped me overall. So it was a different experience. It could have been done much better, but what I got was definitely better than like not having school at all. That would have been very bad.
AP class. Can I talk about AP class?
Yeah, and I had like a college course that I had. Like we have the ability to take college classes and get credits for those. And I took one of them, and they ended up restructuring the entire test, the entire evaluation. And I took the test, and I was very unsure because we had to write a document-based essay. The document didn't make sense, and it was basically just me just trying to make the best of whatever I had. I thought I was going to fail. I was going to get, it's a scoring out of 5. I thought I was going to get a 1, but I checked my score and I got a 4, and many of my friends also got a 4. But then I ended up finding out that a lot of people got 1s and like it didn't do well because it was supposed to be several sections. There was supposed to be a multiple answer section, multiple choice answer. Then you write short responses, and you have 2 different essays, but it just became one essay. And people were very angry, especially because the company that ran this didn't give anybody refunds. And that was like that was the only test I really had. I had some small like check-ins that like tested my math like knowledge for my math class, but other than that, there was nothing really big that I had to like worry about or stress about. And it was nice to like get rest as well, because even though school would end at 2, I was still like I would have like a lot of homework. I wouldn't sleep until like 10 or 11 sometimes, and I would have to wake up at 5. And it was nice to get sleep. I would finish all my work. I could sleep whenever I wanted and basically wake up whenever I wanted, because most of the teachers didn't have any like way to take attendance, even though they were required to. And many of my classes we didn't get assignments. I didn't get to see the teachers at all. And my sister, who's in elementary school, she also had to go through the same stuff, just at a smaller scale. She didn't have as many teachers as I had, but she still had to like do like online assignments. She had more assignments than I did for some reason, but she had to like do some online like quizzes and tests, and they had a better interaction with their teachers, which I found odd, because I felt that the high school, which is would also like do the same, if not better, but that wasn't the case. And they didn't really take score. They didn't do much for they didn't get much grades or anything. They didn't score anything. They didn't have tests. They had like projects that they started during the school year, but it was like nothing like the test that they would get during the actual school year. Also, they had a lot of fun. I heard my sister like conversing with her like classmates like it was a regular school day. They didn't really care. And the teachers were also like great with handling them. And it was nice to see the contrast between like the high schoolers and the elementary school, because the elementary school children were able to handle this much better than like how the high school handled this. Because it's just like, you would assume that the higher grades would be more prepared, but it was the opposite. And along with the teachers, some of the teachers not caring, and just like I never got to see them again, which was sad. But the teachers that did care also happened to be like some of my favorite teachers. They were also the best teachers I've had in my school career. So though it could have been handled better, it's better than nothing, I guess. Thank you.
Thank you, Anish. Thank you. It was wonderful listening to you. You have expressed beautifully. Thank you, Anish. Now, may I request Mrs. Manimuri, Head Department of Education, to propose the vote of thanks? Manimuri?
Ma'am, there is a question for Anis from Sandeep, Dr. Wilson.
Oh, sorry. I didn't notice. Sorry. Go ahead, Deepa. Wilson, you may
Ani?
directly ask. Yeah. Wilson, you may ask. Wilson, you may ask Anish.
Oh, all right. Anish, very nice presentation. I'm in Maine, and so I haven't heard anything about what's going on in New Jersey. And I've just your presentation has been so informative. Thank you so much. I'm going to share it with my teaching students. It's been very helpful. Did you have any other? My question was, what other performance assessments did you have in those courses? You had oil and water, so you had some lab stuff. Were those things? Did you film it or anything? Did it get scored?
It was mostly for completion, not really like graded, but like I heard some of my classmates that they would get like some responses like how to improve on what they did wrong. So for math and for chemistry, the labs, that wasn't like really graded. It was just like a demonstration, and we just got like completion grade for that too. I had another thing for my chorus class where we had to record ourselves singing and practicing the different pieces that we had, but not much other than that.
That sounds good. That sounds good. I was just interested in the performance assessments, like the essay. I give you a lot of credit for writing an essay in a tough situation on something that didn't make any sense. Good for you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Anish. It is really good to see from students' perspective, because many times we think as a teachers we are doing great, but when we listen from you, I can understand that what are the things we have to correct. Thank you, Anish. Now it is over to Manimuri ma'am.
Dr. Wilson ma'am, really your presentation was very good, and your experience and practice spoke a lot. Yes, it was a very good, and you are a very practical person, and you explained very nicely about Bloom's taxonomy, the components, and what are the action verbs you have comes, how to do the mapping. It's not an easy thing to present in 1 hour, but only when you practice it, we will be able to find out how the mapping is being done with learning outcomes and program objectives. And you also explained how to define the rubrics, how to measure the learning outcomes. I think we have to have a very good practice on it, and I think we'll be able to measure the learning outcomes of each and every learner, right? And also you spoke about what are the indicators. This also is very good when we are doing these rubrics. So thank you so much, ma'am, for your wonderful presentation, and it went on very sequentially without any disturbance. It was very nice, and we'll be back with you, and we'll be having touch with you for future programs. Thank you so much, ma'am. And I would like to thank, on behalf of the Department of Education, we thank the Managing Trustee, Thiru TSK Meenakshi Sundaram Annavargal, Chancellor, Padma Shri Dr. P.R. Krishna Kumarji, Vice Chancellor, Dr. Premavati Vijay Madam, Registrar, Dr. S. Kausalya Madam for permitting and supporting us in conducting this one-day international webinar on assessment, feedback, and technology. Sincere thanks to the Research Director, Dr. G.P. Jainti Ma'am, the Dean, School of Education, Dr. T. Gita Ma'am, for welcoming and addressing everybody, and our former coordinator, Dr. R. Anakudi Ma'am, and our former head of the department, Dr. H. Indu Ma'am, for their guidance and support and encouragement. Our heartiest thanks to you, ma'am, for the wonderful presentation, and you have made the day. I think we'll be following you, and we'll be having in touch with you. And I would like to thank Anish Mani for the wonderful experience what he has given to us. Usually we'll not do like this in a webinar, but this was a very good experience. I think we have to follow it. And thank you so much, Anish. And thank you so much for clarifying the doubts, ma'am. Thank you so much for clarifying the doubts, ma'am. What was in the chat, and thank you so much.
Anish, there is a question, there is a message. Ma'am?
Deepa, this is Sharda, ma'am. Can we have Anish mail ID? It's very inspiring. I think we can invite him to talk to our students sometimes later, if he is willing. Can share it.
Yes, ma'am. Sure, ma'am. I will. Anish?
Yeah.
Anish, you may unmute and respond.
Anish, are you there?
My email ID.
Yeah, you just post it in the chat box. And Dr. Wilson shared a message that Anish, can you share email with Deepa? Would you be willing to share email? Would you be willing to communicate with students about your experience?
Hi, Anish. Excellent sharing, experience.
So I'll put my email in my email ID in the chat.
Yeah. Thank you, Deepa. Thank you.
Deepa?
Thank you. Thank you, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
A special word of thanks, Secretary Dr. C. Karthik Deepa, Assistant Professor, for her meticulous planning and execution of this international webinar and making it so successful. So I thank all our faculty members of the Department of Education for their support in conducting this webinar. And we thank all the participants from various parts of India and other countries for their active participation and making this webinar so purposeful. And also I would like to thank Kalaivani Madam and Dr. V. Mrinalini for making this webinar a smooth one. So thank you once again.
Thank you, ma'am. Dear participants, feedback link was sent in the forum. Please fill the feedback form. Anish, once again, I thank you so much for your valuable time.
Thank you.
தீபா ஃபீட்பேக் லிங்க் கொஞ்சம் யூடியூப்ல போடு, நான் போட்டா வர மாட்டேங்குது. வாணி ஃபீட்பேக் லிங்க் கொஞ்சம் யூடியூப்ல போடுங்க, நான் போடுறது போக மாட்டேங்குது. யூடியூப்ல கேட்டுட்டே இருக்காங்க.
அப்படியா, ஒரே நிமிஷம்.